Yes, yes, yes.
Hello, everybody. Thank you for coming. My name is Sam Aldrich, and I'm the gallery associate here, and I have the pleasure of introducing Pat today. So thank you all for joining us this afternoon for the closing of the National Basketry Organization's 9th edition of All Things Considered. Throughout the exhibit, we have had many speakers who have shared insight into their studio practice, and I would like to now give a special thanks to their presentations, which includes artists Lois Russell, Sharon Stanford, Lynn Francis Lund, and Natalie Nieback. We thank you for your contribution to our educational programming. Joining us this afternoon for the exhibition's final public program is renowned fiber artist Pat Hickman. From casting to weaving, Hickman uses investigative processes and non-traditional materials such as translucent hog casing to create intimately scaled baskets and grand installations ranging in themes such as memory, loss, aging, and mortality. Ms. Hickman has taught textile and fiber arts for over 3 decades and continues to teach workshops throughout the country. She is in many permanent collections, including the Museum of Fine Arts Boston, Renwick Gallery in DC, and the American Craft Museum in New York. And now, without further ado, I present Pat Hickman.
Thank you, Sam, and thank you to those of you in the National Basketry Organization and the Society for Arts and Crafts for inviting me to close this series and to be the last person before the exhibition closes. In history classes at UC Berkeley, and in his writing, Ed Rosbach gave credit to 4 women when they were no longer alive for their contributions in the 40s and 50s. He would refer to them as Annie and Dorothy and Mary and Marianne. Annie Albers, Dorothy Liebes, Mary Atwater, and Marianne Strangel. I would like to sort of think about that in connection with where we are today in the world of basketry, because I think enough time has passed that we can begin to look back and sort of think about who made it possible for us to be where we are today. Annie had been both a student and a teacher at the Bauhaus before going to Black Mountain College and then on to Connecticut, where her husband Joseph was at Yale. Dorothy had, she was in San Francisco, and she was known for her love of shocking color, for flashy things. She was using new materials, which seemed outrageous to more traditional weavers. This was now in the 40s, 50s, that period of time. Mary is given credit for the revival of hand weaving. She felt that weavers must have technical knowledge, that she felt there needed to be a revival of hand weaving. She taught correspondence courses. She really wanted people to learn overshot weaving so that these traditional things didn't die. She loved useful, honest fabric. And Marianne from Finland taught at Cranbrook. She taught as far as the 60s, and she wove very simple twill and tabby weaves. She had commissions from architects and believed that artists could influence society and industry. Rosbach, after studying with Marianne, came to a department at Berkeley in which it was very, very different. It had a strong historical, anthropological, and archaeological framework, mostly through the presence of Lila O'Neill, a pre-Columbian textile scholar. It was very intimidating to him when he arrived. Even before the 21st century, I find examples of what I consider art baskets, part of the long continuum between the past and the present. This is Tiahuanaco, an ancient pre-Columbian basket from 300 BC to 300 AD. Buried in a cave, it survived. I think about how today we know baskets. egg baskets, Easter baskets, bread baskets, laundry baskets. We live with them, cheap, mass-produced baskets, all utilitarian and functional. We can imagine this special basket as a ritual basket, individual holding meaning, not sure how it was used, other than it was valued and buried as textile art from long ago. So there really is a long history that we're part of. Baskets are our first achievements from the archaeological past. We see the memory of them, of textile structure in clay shards. In the 50s, early 60s, Rossback became the transitional bridge in the University of California, Berkeley department with his teaching. Here is Ed Rossback in his garden, 1983. He began making baskets in the 1960s. In the 70s, he published 2 books on basketries, which had a huge impact on the field. It was a time of rediscovery of non-loom textile techniques. I was very fortunate to study with Ed Rossback in the 70s, near the end of his teaching career at UC Berkeley. Peter Volquez, at that same period in ceramics at UC Berkeley, was revolutionizing what could be done in clay. I'd like us today to truly revisit what Rossback did in the field of textiles, especially in basketry. Here is Rossback's flag basket, red, white, and blue. He was not especially patriotic. What he did seemed revolutionary, using materials never before imagined by basket makers. He got a raw look with bark cloth and flat reed, materials purchased from the caning shop in Berkeley. Staples were used as a way of holding pieces together, direct, not labor intensive. Rossback knew techniques well. Here's diagonal plating, over 1, under 1, over 2, under 2, of thick, thin elements and paint. His work is structural, often minimal. He enjoyed structure for structure's sake. Color is often monochromatic or extremely brilliant. He let the shape develop as it grew. And here's his tribe of baskets, made with polyethylene film tubing. New materials of the time, plastic waste, throwaways. These were new, fresh explorations. As graduate students of his, we didn't see what he was creating. He didn't bring his work to class. He wasn't exhibiting his work then, but his assignments reflected his own studio explorations, going further in the evolutionary chain. Rossback used materials of our time, newspaper delivered to his doorstep. He thought of it as material in excess, comparable to the use of palm and other natural materials in the Pacific basketry tradition. His doing this was new, expressive, innovative. He valued that which seemingly had no value. Lettuce basket with rice paper over folded plated newspaper is not beautiful. It's lumpy, heavy, thick. Rossback was seeing what he could do. Newspaper baskets related to the size of a sheet of newspaper. Butterfly basket, 1973, of commercial fabric, paper, silkscreen, diagonal plating. His playful imagination, simple, innocent, and childlike, is evident. This is rag basket of commercial fabric folded into strips. It's not limp, not made with yarn, but has stiffness to hold the form. Eagle's Nest box, 1984, of twigs tied, raffia, corrugated cardboard, newspapers, lacquer, constructed. Here are his garden prunings, the whole thing unexpected, off balance. Artwork fails if it appears difficult. He wanted his work, no matter how labor-intensive, to appear easy. And twig basket, a juxtaposition of twigs with purchased flat reed. His baskets are an assertion of nature and the person who made them. Rosbach was reserved, shy, really private as a person, self-questioning. We called him Mr. Rosbach at UC Berkeley, not on a first-name basis until after we graduated, but his work was not reserved. This is called Eskimo Pie, 1987, of a cardboard food carton, folded, stapled. Rosbach took containers and transformed them into another container, maybe seeing text inside. His use of man-made materials seemed to encourage the making of baskets that are lighthearted, new, exuberant, and playful. That spirit remained in the materials he chose to use. He said baskets are open and willing to accept. Here's Purple Basket, 1985, purchased ash splints and torn scraps of commercial fabric, newspaper, and acrylic paint. There's a directness about this with newspaper sort of slapped on, not archival. One feels a freedom in his art making. Rosbach was an urban basket maker, not gathering his own materials. Raffia pitcher as basket, twined, open work, net-like, letting air in, not for holding anything but air and the idea of a pitcher. Coil newspaper basket, 1974. Again, newspaper, polyethylene film tubing, cotton string, with throwaway materials. His work was authentic and real, bold in scale, even though he could hold it in his hands. One of Rosbach's most familiar baskets, a Mickey Mouse coiled basket of seagrass and synthetic raffia. It was competitive at UC Berkeley. Faculty expected to produce, to move up the academic tenure promotion ladder. A lot of pressure. He felt that there was nothing he could do in his field that would be valued by the university. Mickey Mouse was what certain classes were called, a stereotypical put-down. Rosbach chose to use this symbol, to play with it, to claim it, and turning it, to his advantage, somehow just really enjoying creating Mickey in his baskets. This represents a quiet revolution, his enjoying the joke, the craziness, the absurdness of it all. He wrote, he had a correspondence with Mildred Constantine, who at that time was a curator at MoMA. And she had asked for an image of one of his Mickey creations. He wove them also in very sophisticated techniques, damask and dyed ikat. Mickey Mouse appeared in several ways, very refined. But then he also had them in his baskets. Anyway, he sent the image, and Mildred wrote back that she couldn't see Mickey. And he wrote her back that maybe it was Minnie. And he was just greatly amused that here were two adults carrying on about Mickey and Minnie. Anyway, he really felt that people at the university in this academic setting were so afraid of making mistakes, especially putting anything in writing and publishing, that they couldn't risk anything. And Rosbach didn't fit that mold. He wanted his work to be free. He wanted his students' work to be free. He made baskets without apology, without compromise. He valued his own vision more than recognition from the official art world or from the academic world. He didn't have to conform to anybody's standards. He could say anything he wanted to say, even outrageous things. As he felt more alone in his department, he felt more free to do what he wanted to do. He never thought he had an audience, that he could just hole up and do his own work. And as a shy introvert, that was really what he wanted. Rosbach identified with buffalo, with bison, feeling that he too was almost extinct as they were. that what he was doing was so out of his time. He was part of a vanishing way of living. He drew and he used these creatures as a symbol in his work, drawing with felt marker and colored pencil on paper. And then those drawings became images on his baskets. He was not trying to make Native American baskets. His convey a sense of loss, a yearning for what no longer exists. His baskets were different from what baskets had ever been before. He placed his individual handprint on this basket, remembering and so admiring Native basket makers' work by hand. He said Native American baskets in museums are enveloped in a kind of silence that they speak through. He said his making baskets increased his appreciation for all baskets. Here's gridded paper, graph-like, with his drawing of a horse and rider. His drawn figures were quick, fresh, and direct. He saw himself as naive and innocent in the ways of the world. This piece is entitled Greek Soap, S-O-A-P, Soap, 1992, of tulip poplar, covered with color transfer and lacquer. Flat reeds here are covered with paper skin. Rosbach thought you perhaps saw structure better, mysteriously under a thin skin. He transformed materials. Here's a detail of his drawing that was on the surface of that piece. Ed and Katherine Rosbach met in Seattle when both were teaching at the University of Washington. They married in 1950, then moved to Berkeley. They traveled a lot, watched TV, read the New York Times, kept up with what was happening in the world through newspaper and magazine clippings. Their work reflected this, the time they were living in, even at a distance. They were not marching in the streets of Berkeley, but responding. Their curious, creative minds became visible in their work. This is El Salvador, 1984. Rosbach seriously reacted to news and images of the Civil War in El Salvador, expressing his deep sadness at the destruction there. He made this piece with camouflage cloth, shrine-like. And here we see John Travolta's 1978 image on scrim above a platform scaffold of reeds, cotton twine, and electrical tape tied. Rosbach found an image of Travolta after seeing Saturday Night Fever on a plane ride. There's a spontaneous, energetic quality about his using this image, which was such a part of youth-oriented pop culture at that time. Not that he felt part of it, but appreciated it. Katherine Westfall, Ed's wife, died this spring on March 13th at the age of 99. She had a broad art background in painting, having gotten her BA and MA in painting at UC Berkeley. For 8 years, she and Ed designed printed textiles for industry. She was known for her playfulness, her enthusiasm. I never studied with her, but honor her as one of these 4 mentors and as a major influence on the field. She asked me to teach her World Textiles course at UC Davis when she was on sabbatical. When I think of Katherine, I think a bit about the California Gold Rush. Such a heady time, I imagine. I imagine the word no was almost never heard then. It was miners who came without wives, without mothers, and it was a time of excitement and energy. The world of rules was left behind, a spirit of wide open possibilities. And that shaped the time and the Californians who came after it. Katherine is a real, true Californian. She was born in Southern California in LA, probably 5th generation. And the time she was part of, that we were all part of in Berkeley and in the Bay Area, seemed another, if different, heady time. Individual fiber artists were moving in all directions with diverse messages, sorting themselves out through their visual communication, personal and meaningful. Here's Katherine in her studio. Notice what's on the walls: drawings, classical forms, athletes, active, lively, Greek figures, silhouettes, runners, who unexpectedly found themselves on her pots, her baskets. For her, the essence of her art making was all a game, without a plan or sketch. Work grew out of the clutter of materials on her studio table. Her skill as a painter was transferred to everything she touched. Her work was on the surface, flowing, abundant, layer upon layer, active. Katherine had a can-do attitude, confidence in herself, in her work, loving change, taking chances. Work and play were the same. This is called Baroque Palace for Pink Dinosaurs, done in 1991. It's of synthetic and natural raffia, crocheted, and plastic toys. She collected everything, never throwing anything away, as it was potential art material. Even though I never studied with her, I think I picked up that message. Rosbach said people thought Dorothy Liebes would put garbage in her warp, anything that was shiny. Katherine's work had humor in it, truly playful delight. It's hard to sustain humor and whimsy in textiles, as processes are often so labor-intensive, but she did it. She felt she was perched on the top of a pyramid, maintaining a delicate balance between kitsch and art. Nothing was too sacred in her mind to be excluded from her considering it as potential art material. Here are two other crocheted forms made of natural and synthetic raffia, shiny and reflective. Baskets for Katherine were a form for what she wanted to tell, frequently an emotional, expressive reaction to a place, an event, or an object. Her baskets were made one stitch at a time, round and round in a great spiral, starting at the center and moving out and up. Color changes were made by adding various strands of raffia, either by plan or accident. There was no going back and changing. It either worked or it didn't. The process controlled the shape. The tension of stitches determined the form, its softness or hardness. She said, "My baskets are narrative. They make the connection between the real world and my dreams. The idea, the image fills the inside, so they are no longer empty vessels. They have contents as well as context." When Katherine retired from UC Davis, she was given a color copying machine for her play at home. It was a wonderful gift for her, as she was addicted to that machine. Photocopying images, multiplying and distorting generations of them, making them more like drawings. Baroque Gathering here on the left shows one of her heat photo transfers onto rice paper, laminated onto a gourd, a colorful patterned surface. She placed people and animals and flowers in impossible situations. She talked about the egg beater of her mind, totally disregarding the marketplace, listening to her own drummer. Katherine's drawings, lines, hand-drawn grid, filling in images of people from the Middle East, newspaper photos, or from the TV screen. She traveled the world that way long after she'd stopped traveling. Torn bark paper figures and her drawing, so fresh and lively, timeless. Her drawing was like embroidery, pen lines suggesting stitches. On June 10th, tomorrow, colleagues are gathering in her and Ed's home in memory of Katherine to celebrate her life as an artist and friend. For me, reality has hit that these four that I'm talking about today have all now departed. My talk today is honoring them, dedicating this lecture to their memory, feeling this loss and their loss. Katherine was in her husband's shadow, but with her own very strong voice, changing our field. Her message was to play with ideas, to play with materials, and enjoy what you are doing so much that it becomes a passion. It's about the joy of doing with great energy and vitality. Katherine published a book entitled Dragons and Other Creatures, mostly about Chinese embroidery. Here, some of her drawn creatures look mummified. And here's a photo of us, one of the many times I visited her in her home. Ed died in 2002. Even when Katherine needed full-time caregivers, she found time daily to sit at her table and draw, feeling that at least she had control over that part of her day and her making. Lillian Elliott used a full range of techniques, using odds and ends of materials. She never gave up anything in terms of techniques she knew and was interested in. Lillian was serious. Her work was serious. Ed said Lillian was one whose work he greatly admired and who influenced his work and his thinking about textiles. He admired her independent judgments and her integrity. She cared deeply about what she did. She respected and responded to Katherine's work and her playfulness, but that was not what Lillian did in her work. The force of her ideas and intensity of her personality were all part of the liveliness in the Bay Area. Some of her work was ragged and raw. She wanted texture. All stages of her process had expressive power. She conveyed passion about her work, passion for her love of textiles. This is Lillian working in her studio in 1991, stitching bark cloth, birch bark, sort of like cardboard, to be cut and assembled, made into a three-dimensional form. She loved the beauty of bark, its texture and subtle color changes. Her casual assembling and stitching together was like her attitude toward art and life. She saw things as experiments, adding elements, making decisions as she went along. Drawn form, a fluid three-dimensional drawing made of linear elements, the fewest possible lines to encircle space and define volume. 1984, rattan, wax linen, acrylic paint. This is so pared down. She wanted to feel volume. She had studied ceramics at Cranbrook, but felt her pots were always heavy. Her best baskets were not heavy, and she loved that airiness while getting the sense of volume that she wanted. Goya, 1979, was painted black to unify it and speak of the horrors of war. She was so aware of art history and a larger context in time and connection to other artists and painters and sculptors. She felt she stopped seeing if she wasn't drawing. Goya was like calligraphy with a graphic impact, black against white. She loved dark Hebrew letters spelling out text, which she made in an annual series of Passover hangings for the walls in her dining room. Her ideas were no different from ideas addressed by all visual artists, whatever their medium. She wanted her work to have something to do with today's world, with what has touched human life. This work transcended the medium, brought fiber to art and art to fiber. Mummy bundle, 1986, in the shape of an ancient Peruvian mummy bundle, referencing bodies seated, encircled with textiles, buried. At the caning shop in Berkeley, there was one day a week when Jim, the owner, threw away bits and pieces of cane chair bottoms, free. We'd go there and pick them up, not knowing what we'd do with them. That shop had such an impact on Ed, Katherine, and Lillian. Jim would get something new in. Lillian would make something using that material. She and her husband, Roy, would go to the Rossbacks, bringing what she'd made that week to discover that that Rossback had also been to the caning shop, and he'd purchased the same new material. They would share their excitement, playing off each other, influencing each other with their explorations, really feeding off what they saw. It was a small artist community influencing each other. Berkeley in the 70s was the center of the fiber world. People coming, passing through, seeing what this place and the fiber movement was all about. Schools called Fiberworks, Pacific Basin, adult education courses, plus universities and colleges were all offering exciting fiber classes. We'd go running from one thing to another, taking it all in, going to lectures, workshops, available several times a week. It was a frenzy, but you knew you were part of something big that was happening at that moment. This is embroidered rattan, 1992, of Salyugan bark from Indonesia and linen. These are strips wrapping around, encircling the center space, stitching, holding it together. Lillian did what needed to be done to hold materials together. This piece is part of the Farrago basket collection, which was generously given to the Museum of Fine Arts in Boston. There's an ease and immediacy about this, letting in a little air. Lillian was not like Annie Albers, who had a design and followed it. Some of Lillian's baskets were outspoken, filled with energy, pushing the form, the intent. Lillian was opinionated, bold, questioning in her life and her work, breaking boundaries. She was bigger than life, not subtle or quiet. This is a detail of a piece of hers called Refraction, of cedar bark, hickory, linen, 1992, made of small units, building the shape like tiny ladders. She tied elements together with colorful wax linen. The work is restless and alive. It looks spontaneous and casual, not tight, like a net moving in space. Bag. She felt a basket should hold questions and wonder, asking for and requiring the attention of the viewer. And this is from a sheet of fibrous palm cloth from Hawaii. She wanted to see what would happen, to give her ideas a chance, a two-dimensional material manipulated into 3 dimensions. This is a piece called Twined. Lillian asked, what do I want to do most with whatever time I have? She liked materials that could spring back at her. Her work seemed supercharged with the kind of energy. Lillian felt her work was closer to abstract expressionism or to line drawings. Moderation was not a word in her vocabulary. More often, abundance and generosity dominate in her work. She was always wanting more, asking more of herself. She was driven, interested in enclosing space, marking space. Vitality permeated Lillian's work. It was strong and muscular, a big presence. This is Cistern Column, 1992, of mixed materials. It's a complex structure. What interested her was not the technique, but the idea she was trying to express. The piece was purchased by 3 of us, as we couldn't afford it otherwise. Not that it cost that much, but that was the reality. Joannes said, Joanne Branford, I want this action of ours to somehow be a magic potion to make Lillian well, so that she can continue the work which this basket hopefully presages. Made 2 years before Lillian died in 1994, Lillian wanted her baskets to be full, making a strong statement. This piece came after she and I were together in Istanbul, Turkey, where I'd lived for several years, and she came to visit. After going to the Byzantine underwater cistern, where she saw an upside-down column, this piece was born. Her attitude about her work was, you take your heart in your hands and try. Joanne Siegel-Brantford told me in 1972, after studying with her at the Cambridge Adult Education Center, when I was about to move to Berkeley, she told me I had to study with Lillian and Ed, really pointing the way for me. I was sad to be leaving this area where I'd shared a studio with Joanne and others, beginning after 8 years to feel part of a community. Joanne affirmed my interest in textile history. I'd just come back from Turkey, influenced by so much of what I saw there, knowing that things had not just started in 1970. In the Boston area at that time, there was a lot of emphasis on working for industry, textile industry on the East Coast. RISD, FIT, Philadelphia institutions were training people to go in that direction. Joanne felt there were more tightly drawn perimeters and expectations on the East Coast at the time, but not so in California, where she'd spent her formative years, greatly influenced by her mentor, Anna Gayton, who taught textile and costume history as art and art history at UC Berkeley. Lillian, at that time teaching part-time, shared an office with Joanne and encouraged Joanne's creative studio making in addition to her interest in history. It was a place and time of self-expression, what was adventurous in artwork. Joanne knew and said to me, Californians would take a chance on anything, and there was a critical mass of creative people making a palpable fiber community. This is Joanne's work. Here she's using dyed raffia. Joanne figured out how nets could stand up on their own and be assertive, not soft hanging nets. She resolved forms, especially as she used stiffer materials like rattan, which became hard nets. Her work over time became clearer in volume. This is a piece called Bundle. Joanne never used traditional basket making techniques. Those ways belonged to others, but she came to feel she was very much a part of the basket tradition growing since the 1960s. Still again, 1992, in rattan, dyed in a technique called sprang. Joanne tried to ignore her degenerating heart condition. She made baskets confronting the question of whether her heart would hold up to her demands. The sprang form is held together by an almost invisible thread. A viewer feels the tension and the reality of her lack of time. She said, I hope I will have the strength to do baskets. I think I will. She had tremendous, determined life force. A piece called Nuzzle, expressing ideas of closeness, exploring a form, an idea, pushing it as far as she could. And Wing, ideas of openness. Her work dealt with space and air passing through, and light. She said baskets breathe, seem to be alive. That's what art does. Hell's Gate in 1992, made of rattan and paint. She arrived at basket making through her love of textiles. She pushed the limits of her materials. She wrote, each basket completed asked questions leading to the next one. This research is rewarding. Her scholarly research, studying collections of North American baskets with their strength and variety at the Peabody Museum and at the Wadsworth Atheneum, fed her creative studio work. Stump and Sojourner of dyed rattan and nylon in sprang, which is plating on a frame. She gave us work that breathes. Reclining Figure, 1992. With this piece, Joanne pushed herself to work larger. She wrote, I'm currently trying to resolve a relatively large piece, which is a big challenge. Baskets as body, as dwelling space. Sculpture with an open heart. a capacity to be both empty and inviting, a fullness. There's magic in that. Joanne breathed life into her work, not distancing herself from what she was experiencing, creating work more alive and strong than ever before. A detail of that piece. Joanne died in April 1994, 2 days after she came to be with those bearing Lillian. Lillian and I collaborated for 11 years, shared a studio. Lillian felt strongly that the field needed critical looking, serious criticism. We were brutally honest in our looking at our joint work and at each other's work, and built an extraordinary level of trust. Our work was a dialogue of structure and skin, really coming together, a marriage of the materials, one having an impact on the other. There were no rules governing our collaborative work. River Styx was our first collaborative piece. Lillian built the structure and wanted some skin-like material to cover it. I thought the material, hog casings, that I was working with might do that. This is Romany in 1985 of mixed materials. It's 5 feet high by 8 feet 2 inches across and 6 feet 7 inches in depth. Here, Lillian is having a trial run, we both were, putting this large sculptural basket together before shipping it to Switzerland. After Lausanne, Lillian pared down the structure, the complexity of structure, for our collaborative work using larger elements. And I knew by then that I could cover very big spaces, really the world with gut. Our basket, as part of the Lausanne Biennial in 1985, the year the theme was textiles as sculpture. And this is a piece that came after that called Taut. It was a statement again of structure and skin. We became known for our body of work of these white baskets. The structure was simpler with bigger spaces for me to cover. And a piece called Thorns. Once we overheard someone who in a gallery was looking at our work and said, "Oh, that's not nice." And we took it as a compliment. We liked that about our collaborative work. This is work of mine. My hands came to appreciate volume vicariously through working on collaborative structures that Lillian created. Sometimes we'd go to an exhibit of African baskets or Japanese helmets. We'd come back to the studio and try to get the qualities of what we'd seen, giving credit where it was due for the rawness and the power of them. Not to imitate or duplicate, but try for their vigor and energy in museum exhibits. We were influenced by what we saw that was made in other parts of the world. Through our long-term collaboration, we came to understand what the other was trying for. Here are a few examples of my work. During our years of collaboration, it was essential that we each continued to work on our own individual body of work. This piece I called Vesicle, both structure and skin out of the membrane, sausage casings as material. And a piece called Ordnance, open work in cast bronze. I was very interested in the translation of fiber to metal after completing monumental gates in 1994 on the island of Maui. I liked the idea of using textile techniques, but instead of soft, having it be hard in cast form. And this is Tumbleweed, drawing on place and influence from my past, where I grew up on the plains of Colorado. And river teeth. It's a material from the inside of spruce trees, which we never see unless a tree disintegrates. Pieces which hold branches to the trunk of a tree. I'm currently using these in installations. So these 4 artists, Ed and Katherine, Lillian and Joanne, have given us an incredible legacy through their work and their teaching, sort of like a sourdough starter needed for our own making. This lecture has given me the opportunity to reflect on, to really be with these four who've helped us get where we are today, breaking boundaries. Others in the field have spoken of these four artists and deserve credit for earlier writing and speaking about each of them. Ed, Katherine, and Lillian were extensively interviewed as part of an oral history project at UC Berkeley. I've drawn on their own words and that of others. These four gave me the legacy that I personally inherited and that we have been given, even if you didn't know or study with them. Now that we've looked together at some of their work and contributions, I'd like to reflect on shared qualities that I think they each had. One, they had a deep love and respect for textile history, world textiles. They taught it, drew on it, collected it, and gave assignments making reference to ethnographic textiles, not to imitate or duplicate, but to learn from and be inspired by. Two, all four made art in the fiber medium, a broad range: loom weaving, surface design, wearable art, card weaving, netting, making something two-dimensional into 3 dimensions, creating baskets. They did all of it, and they knew techniques well and explored what they could do using them. But their work was not about the technique. Instead, it was a means of expressing ideas and form. 3, they each drew and valued drawing as a way of seeing. And 4, they weren't creating to market their work or make a living from what they did. They were artists driven to do what they were doing. They knew art was worthwhile, and they felt there was no hierarchy of the arts. They were all the same thing. They loved their involvement and got great pleasure in the doing. They competed with their own self, not with others, to see what they might do, going beyond the last basket they created. And they were in each other's lives, sharing their latest, sparking discussion, new ideas, new possibilities, in dialogue over a cup of tea, through writing postcards and letters back and forth, especially with Joanne on the East Coast. They didn't have computer communication. They showed each other something they'd just done and re-excited each other. They understood what the other was trying for, and they shared through their teaching honestly and personally. With Rosbach's teaching, students did work they never imagined they could do. They surprised themselves. He taught confidence. So students left feeling that they had all this potential and were capable of doing good work even if they didn't always get it. But he encouraged this. He encouraged students to accept what they were doing. Thus, a forum was there for the community that was built in the Bay Area and which had a geographic impact nationally and internationally, way beyond that place. The experience of being part of that time was a gift, an extraordinary gift, dare I say a gift basket, to be entered into by those lucky few of us who happened to be in the right place at the right time, open to the experience and changed by it as future artists and teachers. There are so many others who benefited from their mentoring. I'm leaving out many who should be included. Enough time has passed that we can see the genealogy passed down. Others in the Bay Area who studied with Rosbach, Ginger Locke, for example, gave credit to Rosbach, of course. And on the East Coast, John McQueen, one of the principal figures in contemporary American basket making, gave credit to Rosbach, being inspired by his writings, his publications. McQueen and Joanne talked with each other about their work. They lived close together in upstate New York. Hisako Sekijima was greatly influenced by McQueen. Dorothy Gill Barnes and her work were part of that time, going her own direction. Kei Sekamachi is still actively part of the Bay Area fiber scene. Her mentoring goes back to Trude Germonpré, who was part of the Bauhaus legacy and Black Mountain College with the support of Annie Albers. Kay gave credit to Lillian's and my collaboration for influencing her beginning to think of structure and skin-like material, with her using rice paper and skeletal leaves, which she molded over the beautiful wooden bowls of her husband, Bob Stocksdale. And there are newly emerging artists, such as Martha Bird, the first lecturer in this series here, and whose work is in the exhibit, who gives credit to Rosbach's books. So the legacy continues into future generations. There are just a few other artists I must mention who don't neatly fit into this legacy, but somehow seem connected. Martin Puryear's Brunhilde, whose large sculpture of cedar and rattan looks filled with breath, waiting to exhale. And Patrick Doherty's stickwork architecture has been created in so many site-specific installations around the world. He's known for his large-scale work and bending, weaving tree saplings, often in relation to a site. The first work I saw of his was at the De Cordova years ago, which seemed really related to the shape of that amazing place. And Doug and Mike Starn on the roof of the Met, their bamboo construction in 2010. Shawn Go is an important contemporary basket maker living in Tulsa. She's Eastern Band Cherokee. This basket is entitled Prepared for the Fall, of watercolor paper, archival inks, acrylic paint, gold foil. Her work with images carries meaning and content based on human rights issues related to Native Americans. This one is called They Were Called Kings, 2013, showing text and names inside, dates, documents, names of broken treaties. Steph Goren is an emerging basket maker with hashtag Bring Back Our Girls 2015 of rebar steel, paper, vinyl images totally from the web, showing the impact of social media. Goren shows the faces of the 276 students kidnapped from the secondary school by Boko Haram in Nigeria. Kim Sooja is an artist whose work I admire greatly. This is 2003, and this is an extraordinary work called A Mirror Woman, The Ground of Nowhere. It was at the Honolulu City Hall, open to the sky. In this, she's addressing issues of immigration, uncertain footing, being off balance. The outside column of white cloth extends 60 feet into the air. You can go inside it, so viewers can enter inside this white cloth column and stand or lie on a mirror surface looking up to see the circle of sky. It was unsettling to see birds or airplanes fly across. I felt contained inside the soul of this enclosed space. This is a work in progress made by a Japanese artist in 1985 in Lausanne. It's a work in progress made of totally unexpected material. Here, a basketry wall being created. Light and air pass through thin slices of corrugated cardboard that have been glued together. The units are wired in place, beautifully figured out in construction. His name is Katsuhiro Fujimura, and he created really these most beautiful classic vessel shapes, all out of corrugated cardboard. And here's the interior view of an elevator, one elevator at the New Whitney Museum. It's designed by the architect Richard Archwager, 6-on-4, a basket for carrying people up and down, with the image on powder-coated stainless steel. Andy Goldsworthy's new film, Leaning into the Wind, encouraged me to look again at this deserted house. Roof caved in, trees, branches growing up inside. In the film, he wanders inside the remains of an abandoned house in Brazil. And he talks about the soul, the heart of the home, the unseen presence of the lives of people who once lived there. Architecture can feel basket-like. A bottom, open at the top, walls, the sky, and a statement of time. Goldsworthy has a way of working his creative mind, encourages him to step off the path, trying to make sense of his life. It's a source of inspiration for me. Katherine Westfall wrote, "My house is a basket, a place of baskets, of basketry. Each basket from all over the world is an individual, a living thing." And I think of Westfall's house, two creative artists making art full-time when no longer teaching. Their home became a basket containing remarkable energy and play and art. Ed wrote, "Baskets have history. There's no limitation with baskets. They can be whatever you want them to be. A room is a container, a house. The body is. It's so open." Finally, here's the work of British architect Thomas Heatherwick. His vessel at Hudson Yards in New York City is being constructed at the north end of the High Line. It's a climbing frame, 154 intricately interconnected flights of stairs, 80 landings for exploration and play inside the vessel. The base is 50 feet across. The top will be 150 feet at the mouth. This playground captures the spirit of art baskets in the 21st century. We can celebrate this monumental architectural vessel. Even with its recognizable form, the parameters are loose and ever expanding. Individuality is palpable. The future seems limitless. We can only wonder what we've not yet imagined. And I'd like to show you a time lapse. Just a minute here. Oops, where's the cursor? Oops. Well, I'm not doing it. Gotta go down to that. Yeah, there it is. There we go.
Make it bigger.
Seen it once, I say, let's do it again.
It's not open yet, but it will be. Now I just want to go back to. Great. Yeah, let's do that. So Ed and Katherine, Lillian and Joanne, I like remembering the four artists whose breaking of boundaries was revolutionary. I think of them as the four ribs, spokes, verticals, the skeletal structure of an art basket that we've inherited and will continue to build on. Thank you to those mentors for what they've given all of us. Thank you.
Thank you.
If you have questions, I'd be happy to answer them. Yeah, Linda.
Did Heatherwick conceive of that as a basket? Was it, or is it just crazy structure?
He calls it vessel. which to me is a word that basketry people certainly use and think about. I've not heard him say that he was thinking basket, but when I saw this, I thought, basket, this is it. Yeah. No, it's exciting. It seems really wonderful to me. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, George.
Well, I come from a scientific discipline where everybody's trying to figure out why something is. And I wonder, as I see what has been done by these artists, where we might be if instead the scientists turned around and tried to make what could be out of what is, instead of trying to understand what is out of what could be.
Go for it. Sounds good to me. I'd like to see that. Yeah, that's great. I don't know what that was. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, could you talk for a few minutes about what
Excuse me. I think YouTube is entering our life here. I'm just gonna. Yeah.
about what you're working on now, what you're trying to figure out now,
Yeah.
what your sort of design challenges
Right.
are.
Yeah. I have an installation that I'm working on now that will open in September at the Garrison Arts Center on the Hudson. And I'm still using river teeth. River teeth are the last part of trees to let go. It's sort of petrified, almost really hard wood. And they're inside trees. We don't see them. And I'm really interested in things we don't see but are there. This winter, when so much ice came down the Hudson, we could see hunks of ice in the way that I hadn't seen before when I crossed the river on ferry boat. And it was like currents really moving. That you see, but you don't. It seems to me there are layers of currents underneath that upper surface. So one of the things I'm trying to do is get the action and the motion of that movement of currents through placement of a lot of river teeth. And then above that, I'm also interested in wind currents. And again, we don't see them. I sort of feel they're there, but they're invisible. So I'm playing with trying to, in this installation, have a relationship between the water and the wind in terms of motion. And, you know, it's not a basket, but it's what I'm thinking about right now. Yeah. And if you see river teeth, let me know. I need more of them. I'm going up to Maine soon. Gail and I are going to gather more because that's where I get them.
How would you find them?
At Haystack, which is a school in Deer Isle, Maine, there's a wonderful wooded path. And for some reason, the conditions there are really right, and trees fall over in winter storms, and they rot. And I'm not in water gathering these, but the trees are disintegrating, and if they're ready to be picked up, you just barely have to wiggle them if they're still attached. They can be all sizes, tiny to huge, right?
And which part of the tree do you find them on the joint of where branches?
They're inside a tree trunk, and they're pointy. I should have shown a slide of what they look like. I did show one, yeah. They're pointy. They sort of look like archaeological tools or farm tools. You don't know what they are. But I covered them with the sausage casings to hold on to the life longer, sort of like shrink wrapping them. Yeah.
Wow.
So anyway, that's what I'm doing.
Is.
Yeah.
An example of what is, and now you're working on what could be.
You never know. That's right. You don't know. Yeah. Other questions? Well, we can just chat informally afterwards. Thank you for coming.
So one more round of applause for the artists and Pat.
Yeah, thank you.
I just have a couple things to let you guys know about. We do have another exhibition up and coming. Donna Ray Martyr, featuring her new body of textiles titled The Cover Up, is opening Thursday, June 21st from 6 to 9. And we also have Niho Kuzuru's exhibition, Infinite Vibration, which will be opening at the same time. And then that reception is on the 21st from 6 to 9, and then there will be an artist talk from Donna in August, so look out for that. And then please enjoy the show while it's up today, and thank you very much for coming.
Thank you.
Thank you, Sam.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for